Well, we've been doing this for so long, I almost forgot what episode number we're up to, but it's number 11. Here I am, Chucky, from the forums, as always, and we've got G-Money.
Well, it is your boy,
okay.
Jigsaw.
Jigsaw, yeah.
How you guys doing?
Once again, 5 more movies.
Indeed, we have an interesting lineup tonight. First up is a 2007 slasher titled 7 ET 5. It's a 75, which is also known in the US generally as a Dalton. And it's an interesting movie. Next up, we have a pretty well-known movie, The Mist, also from 2007, based off a short story by Stephen King. Following that, we have I call it a British movie, titled Dominique from 1979. Then we have a classic German movie from 1932 titled Vampyr, which is a pretty well-known movie if you're into more classic horror. And lastly, we have a 2018 sort of action type movie titled Searching, which is it got pretty good reviews patient-wise, so it's probably a decently well-known movie. So, they're also what we are discussing tonight.
Okay, so we're going to start with 75. I don't know what you're doing there.
Well, it's because technically in the title it's 7 ET.
7
yeah,
5. Yeah.
That's a pretty bad title. That's just my opinion, but I mean, what do I know?
Well, you know, the funny thing about it is that you've got that title, then you've got this other title, which seems to be like a reissued title just for the US called Dead Tone.
Which is generic, but I don't like either one.
Yeah. Well, like you're saying, Dead Tone's more generic. I think 75, I don't necessarily like, you know, they've got the 7 and the 5 in the title. It's a little too much, but I guess, you know, because the movie revolves around that game, I guess that's the title I prefer to call it. And that seems to be the title that most countries use. So essentially it's just about a bunch of college students going to a party at a secluded mansion, and during the night they play a game of 75, which involves calling a random stranger and trying to keep them on the line for a minimum of 75 seconds without that person finding out it's a prank call, basically. And it usually involves most of the prank calls pretending to be some sort of deranged type of person coming to kill them. I think one girl treats it like it's a sex line, or and I guess they're not all that inventive for a bunch of learned individuals. These smart college students who aren't all that smart in the movie. Anywho, one of them seems to prank call a real maniac, and this leads to a slasher crashing their party and basically massacring the fuck out of the mansion. So, I do remember seeing this movie back when it came out, and sort of more recently, I saw a cheap Blu-ray copy, $6-7, whatever it was, and decided, okay, I'll just buy it and watch it again. If for anything, I remember I did find there's a song in the end credits that I used to listen, or still listen to, a lot of like metal type music, and there was a song there that I remember enjoying, so I thought at least I'll listen to that song again. Anywho, the funny thing about this movie, it's so weird because it's got all these douchey characters, like really ultra cliched as well. You know, you've got the preppy rich boy, and you've got the overtly gay guy, and you know, you've got the token black guy. That guy was
gay?
Well, yeah. And you know, you've got the white boy trying to act like a black guy, and yeah, they've got all these silly characters. And the funny thing about it is, as I watch this movie, at least the first half before all the slashing action happens, it feels like it's a movie where they watched Scary Movie. You know, the parody movie of all the slashers.
Yes.
It's like they watched that and then said, let's turn that into a serious movie, rather than seeing all these serious movies and then turning them into parodies. So it's kind of like a reverse parody, I guess. At least that's how it feels to me, and that makes it somewhat amusing. So I say this with a little bit of shame that I actually sort of enjoyed it.
So I'm a pretty big fan of slasher movies, as long as they're from the 70s or 80s. If it's a post-2000 slasher, I have very I'm not sure what the right word would be. Some of them work for me and many of them don't. And this movie, I thought it had potential, but it didn't really do that much for me. I mean, it was enjoyable in a way, but I mean, it's not something I can ever imagine myself going out of my way to watch again. I mean, honestly, if you see it once, it's pretty fine. I mean, the characters were, generally speaking, pretty horrible. I thought most of the slaughter once the killer got to the house, I thought most of that was pretty, generic, and not much of it's told out. There's like an okay decapitation, but
there's a couple
that's
of
about it.
decapitations.
Yeah, there were too. And that's most, I guess you can only do so much with an axe, but I mean, I wasn't blown away. I mean, and also the killer looks like he was taken straight out of Urban Legend, and that was sort of disappointing too. So, I mean, it's like the exact same code. So, that was somewhat disappointing. I mean, I don't know, the movie's okay for like a 2007 slasher. I don't think it has enough going to make it that great, and even the ending, though I think it's creative, and I think it's sort of interesting, I don't think it was executed that well. And I would rather not talk about the last 5 seconds of the movie, which I thought were completely horrible.
Yeah, it does kind of come off as sort of like a Scream ripoff. You've got the killer on the phone, and then the kind of twist towards the end, even though it's not exactly the same as Scream, it's kind of like a similar type of twist. Yeah, but I thought with the maniac killer in the movie, the one wearing the coat, even though it is kind of like a ripoff of Urban Legend, and I just enjoyed a lot of the way they filmed a lot of his attacks. Not necessarily the kills themselves, but like a lot of close-up shots where you can't really see the guy's face, but I don't know. I just thought some of those shots were pretty entertaining for me. I mean, we've got Rutger Hauer in the movie, and he
It's pretty pointless in my opinion.
Yeah. His character didn't really add that much to the movie, but it's kind of still good to see that veteran type presence in the movie. I think without him, even though he didn't really add anything to the movie,
never would have made DVD.
Yeah, so. Yeah, it would have been even more difficult, I think, for some people to kind of keep their interest. So just kind of having his face on the screen probably did something for someone out there. Unfortunately, as we all know, he died, about 4 weeks ago.
Yes.
Yeah. I guess the other thing that I mean, you can't really watch this movie and take everything too seriously with it. Like I said, it does have this feel where it's like they're trying to turn a parody movie into a serious movie, and like that.
My quick question to you is, how do you know they were trying to turn a parody into a serious movie, or they were just making a shit movie?
Well, no, they're probably just making a shit movie. I'm just saying that's how it kind of felt to me. I don't think that's actually what they were trying to do. That's just kind of how it came across to me. Like just some of the outrageous, over-the-top characters, and just how really cliched a lot of them were. But also, one of the main black actors, the one who, I don't know if he created the game, but he's the one always proposing let's play 75 or whatever. You'd think that the events that took place right at the start of the film, like 12 years ago, that right then, with all the mayhem that ensued then would stop you from wanting to play that ever again. And he seems quite proud to be like the ringleader of 75 or whatever it is.
Yeah, I didn't quite understand. I feel like they could have maybe done a little more going into, I mean, not just his character, but, I know the characters are sort of generic, cookie cutter cutouts, but even so, they could have gone a bit deeper into some of it. I mean, there was, like I said, there was a potentially, interesting story to be told there. I just don't know if they did that great of a job seeing it.
Yeah, I mean, I can see, like, to most people, this is a pretty below average slasher, or depending on how much you enjoy post 2000 slasher flicks. So, it really is a product of its time, where you were getting a lot of cheap movies out on DVD, and I don't think the budget was all that high.
On the upside, you did get Crazy Carl, so I mean, you have some things going for you.
Yeah.
Actually, the funny thing is, he's probably one of the better characters in the movie. I mean, he did try to help out pretty, he seemed okay. Honestly, the competition's not very high, but...
Usually his type of character, I think, has a lot of trouble getting with the ladies, and he managed to get some.
Not only did he get some, he got the hottest one, so...
Yeah.
Just my opinion.
I can't recall exactly which ones were the hottest ones, but yeah, I'm sure it was good.
She was the Latino chick.
Yeah, the one who pretended to be the sex line or whatever.
I watched that scene about 6 times.
Yeah, and I believe the movie, I don't know if it was fully funded or partially funded by Irvin Johnson, who is a very popular basketball player for anyone out there. Magic Johnson. So, he clearly just put up some money and was like, make a cheap film. Hopefully I get some money back out of this. Yeah, so 775. The 75. We're gonna really run that one into the ground.
And I'm not done yet.
Yeah, it's a movie that's it's not a good movie, but for some reason I just kind of enjoyed the fact that everything was just either over the top or just so silly that I found it amusing, at least for the first half, and then I found the second half with all the slashing to be not great, but quite entertaining enough. I give the movie... I'll sneak it up to a 7 out of 10, which seems like a pretty generous score for something that I think most people would probably give a 5 on average, give or take. But no, I enjoyed the hooded slasher character, even if it's kind of like a direct rip-off of some other movies out there.
Yeah, I don't think the movie is necessarily terrible. It's definitely a below-average movie. But, it's watchable. If you're a fan of slashes, you can probably have an okay time at this one. I thought there was a bit of a struggle getting through, I don't know, maybe like the first 20 minutes or so. Because the beginning's okay, but then you get like a bunch of completely unlikable college kids, and you hate every single one of them. And the ones you do like are making stupid decisions, so it's sometimes difficult. If they had changed a few ways that they executed the conclusion, maybe had a few more flashbacks, or just explained a few things about it, I think it might have gone a long way to at least help. And like I said, the last 5 seconds of the movie was completely terrible. I can't stand. Like, they could have just ended it. It would have been okay if they just ended it, but they had to do that. And a lot of movies do that. But why? It just... I mean, I almost took a point away just for that ending. I just hate stuff like that. It was so pointless. The movie's okay. If you're a fan of slashers, you'll probably have an okay time. But it is a below average movie, and I'll probably give it a 6 out of 10.
It's funny where you mentioned that, because I for some reason I still just find that amusing, given everything else that happened in the movie. So I thought those last 5 seconds, even though it's like really corny and
He actually, you make a good point. If it was intentional, if it was intentionally done because it's so stupid, then that's a well done decision.
Yeah. It almost seems like they're taking the piss at that point. Anyways, actually, one other thing I thought I'd just quickly mention, that blonde girl who gives out the address to the mansion. I mean, what an idiot. And that's just another one of those, like, over-the-top idiotic moments in the film that just, like, you're just sitting there thinking, how is this person even in college? Like,
I mean, it was the pizza man asking, she just had to tell. That's a close-up of the pizzas.
Pretty similar voice to the guy that was the supposed maniac on the phone. He didn't really try to hide his voice or anything. It's like, what an idiot.
Well, he needs a job too. I think we can probably both agree. Well, I guess I'll find out. I would argue this next movie is probably better. And of course, we are talking about The Mist from 2007. The story is decently simple. A man, played by Thomas Jane, goes to a small supermarket with his son and a neighbor. And once they're at the supermarket, this mist sort of encloses the town they live in and the supermarket, and there seems to be some type of dangerous creatures in the mist, with either tentacles or creatures that fly, and there are people who in the supermarket may not believe these exist, and much to their displeasure, they find out they may be mistaken. And the movie is sort of two things going on. The guy, Thomas Jane, has to deal with these monsters on the outside, but there's also some dangerous things happening inside the supermarket when an extraordinarily religious woman starts talking about the end of times, and the more she talks, the more people listen, and it leads to, in my opinion, some of the most terrifying parts of the movie. But before I get too deep into this one, what did you think about this one? I know you've seen it quite a few times.
Yeah, I originally saw it at the theaters. Yeah, I think it's a decent movie. I mean, this is based on a Stephen King novel, isn't it?
Technically, it's a short story, but yes.
A short story? Okay. Well, yeah. I mean, that goes to show how much Stephen King I read, or how much I read in general, which is nothing at all. I like the big, what would you call it, monster? Like, there's this huge thing out there.
Yeah, I would use a generic term monster, but I'm sure this creature might be a more official term.
Yeah, or this massive creature, whatever it is out there. I enjoyed knowing that thing's out there, but all the other... Well, they had like all these other type of creatures or bugs or big bugs. Or, I don't know what they were, but I didn't really care for any of the other things that were potentially dangerous. Like, they didn't really do much for me.
Not even the spiders?
Maybe they're okay. Well, yeah, I mean, I hadn't seen this one recently, so I'm probably missing a few details, but I know the huge creature outside is the thing that I was always thinking about during the movie. Like, that was the one concern on my mind, not all these other things. Just, yeah. I mean, it was okay, all the other things happening in the store, and like you're saying, that religious lady, when she kind of starts convincing people to start this, I guess, like a cult. That part of the movie is also quite interesting and a little scary for the other people who still remain somewhat grounded in reality and didn't jump aboard the whole religious train. I mean, the movie, it really made you root for those main people who eventually do try and, break out of the store and make a run for it, rather than all these idiots, just sitting around praying or doing whatever they're doing. And I remember I'd seen Thomas Jane in, I think it was The Punisher a couple years prior. I know you're not big on action, but that was a movie that I thought was quite decent, and so I kind of enjoyed just seeing him in certain movies around that time. I wouldn't say I was a huge Thomas Jane fan, but I enjoyed, just seeing him on the screen. So I found that it really made you want to root for these guys to kind of make it out alive. And as we all know, it's got a pretty devastating ending, so big kick to the nuts. Yeah.
I want to save the ending for just a little bit. I want to sort of piggyback off what you just said. I've also seen Thomas Jane in The Punisher. It's a decent movie. Although, to be honest, I actually always liked Punisher War Journal or War Zone more, which is a controversial opinion, but I thought it was about the Punisher movie. The cast in this movie, I think, is fantastic. If you've seen, a few well-known Stephen King related movies, Shawshank Redemption, Storm of the Century, which is one of my favorite Stephen King related miniseries. You'll recognize a lot of these faces. For instance, Jeffrey DeMann, who was also in the 1988 The Blob, which we discussed, like 6-7 shows back. There's a actor named Toby Jones in this movie who plays a sort of a geeky, meek-seeming manager, but he is probably one of the most badass characters in the movie. There's just a bunch of characters. The religious woman, well, I forget what the actress's name is, but she did a fantastic job. Like every time she was on screen, at least I'm sure she had some people who defended her, but I just hated her. She was such a character who is just so easy to hate. So it's just there's a lot of great cast members here, and no, I think the story is really well done, and I actually like most of these creatures. I mean, I'm not like the fly things. I did it, I was like terrified of them, but I thought, if these creatures came from I think another dimension is the common thought. And on just a quick side note, I've not actually read the Stephen King story this is based off of. I've only seen the movie, so I don't know if the story goes into much detail about this. But I thought the creatures were okay. If they came from like another dimension, it makes you wonder just how horrible that dimension would be. Well, I guess they find out. So I don't know. I think the cast really works, and the story is good, and the cast really brings the story together. So, I mean, pretty much on our side, I think the movie generally works, including the ending, which is a fantastic ending, and people who hate the ending just don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, that's in terms of devastating endings. It's definitely one of the ones that's right up there. And I'm glad that they didn't have like test screenings where people made them change it and all that kind of stuff. I enjoy the non-conventional type endings to movies, which usually involve everything working out.
Yeah, I know that when this came out, no, I unfortunately did not see this one in theaters, but I do know the ending got very mixed reaction. I mean, some people really liked it, and like I said, I really liked the ending. I thought it was realistic. I didn't see what the problem. I know it's it's unfortunate, but it makes sense in the context of the story. But I know that other people were just horrified by it, and I actually have a friend on another horror website who thinks the movie's almost perfect aside from the ending, which ruins it, which is a very interesting point of view in my opinion.
So he loves the movie but hates the ending.
Yes.
What a weirdo.
I know, that's how I feel. And luckily I'm not alone on that.
I know there's some versions out there where they give you the option of watching this in black and white. I haven't done that. Have you happened to try that?
I have not. I read about that, like one of the DVD releases has like you can watch in black and white, and when I read that, I'm like, that'd be an interesting idea. I can see why for a major movie like this they didn't go that route, for the release, because that would have turned quite a few people off, unfortunately. I've not seen it like that, but I think it would be interesting. It probably, I don't know, in some ways I actually think it might make the movie even more sort of a claustrophobic type thing, so that might be worth a try in the next 50 years.
As you know, I'm not such a huge fan of cinema back in the black and white days, but I'm thinking maybe for this, like, because some of the CGI in the movie, I mean, overall it's pretty decent, but sometimes there's some moments where it just kind of sticks out a little bit, like, and perhaps if they took all the color out of it, and maybe that would make a difference in terms of making that CGI look even a little bit more realistic.
Yeah, I'll say the I'm going to give this movie a pretty high score, so spoilers, but the one small thing I had an issue with was some of the CGI seemed a bit spotty at times, and it wasn't like a big deal. It did, at least for me, it didn't take me out of the movie, but it was noticeable a few times, so it was somewhat disappointing. Out of interest, aside from Thomas Jane, do you have a favorite character in this movie? Or is it pretty much
no,
Thomas
not
Jane?
really. I mean, I don't have any like Thomas Jane fetish like your John Goodman fetish, but
Yes, he is an attractive man.
yeah, I just don't mind seeing him on the screen after having seen him in The Punisher, like I said, which I fairly enjoyed. Yeah, I mean his neighbor, the one black guy, kind of annoyed me just for the simple fact that he was so dismissive or wouldn't believe him, and I don't know, something about him made me go, "You idiot."
Yeah, I thought that character was really interesting. The actor, and it's sort of a French name. I'm going to butcher the pronunciation, so I apologize beforehand. But it's like Andre Brajo, something like that. He's not that well known, but he's been in a few decent movies. He was actually in a movie from 2000 titled Frequency, which I thought was a pretty fantastic movie. But his character was pretty interesting. When I first saw this movie many years back, I thought he was going to be one of the main characters, along with Thomas Jane. But 25 minutes into the movie, Thomas Jane and he are on completely different sides of this, and that's a bridge that never gets fixed. So I actually thought it was very interesting and somewhat unconventional. I thought the movie had a lot of good things going for it. I really think the cast is fantastic. There's so many great cast members. Especially Jeffrey DeMann and Toby Jones. And Thomas Jane is good too, but Toby Jones' character here was just really enjoyable. The story, of course, it's written by Stephen King. The story is pretty good, and from my understanding, they didn't really change that many things from the short story to the movie. So that's nice. And of course, my opinion, one of the most interesting things about the movie is sort of the almost dual antagonists. That's not just the monsters outside that they have to deal with, but it's the monsters inside in the form of fundamentalist Christian religion, which was terrifying because at least in my country, the USA, it's not uncommon to hear that type of stuff. And there's quite a few people in power in this country who believe along the same lines. So it's not like it's entirely unrealistic that this type of thing could happen if a situation like this ever arose. So I don't know, I thought it was a very interesting movie. I like the sort of a character study almost of some of this stuff. So I think it had a lot of things going for it, and I really enjoyed it. Aside from some CGI issues, I think the movie's pretty fantastic. So I'd give this a 9 out of 10.
Yeah, well, I give it a 7. And I think it's a pretty decent movie. I enjoyed the big creature outside. We don't get to see a whole lot of that, but I guess that helps to build up the suspense for when people actually do get caught outside. And those I thought those were the scariest moments of the film to me. Outside of maybe the religious lady almost convincing people to start hurting others in there
sacrificing people. That's a fantastic.
Yeah. Sorry, there's parts of the movie that I enjoy, and then there's parts where I could take it or leave it. Like I said, some of the bug type characters didn't necessarily care for those, and part of that's probably because of the CGI. But obviously, it's got a really good ending, an ending that really sticks with you for pretty much forever, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's a pretty decent movie. One that I don't mind watching every now and then. Yeah, I just don't love the movie.
Speaking of movies that you probably don't love, what is next? I mean, I have no idea how you feel, but...
So next up we've got Dominique from 1979. Pretty simple story. It's about a husband who drives his wife to suicide so can inherit whatever money she has. She seems to be quite a wealthy woman. I guess it's one of those situations where the husband and the wife have separate money. I would have thought they would have been combined. But anyways, so not long after her death, he starts seeing his wife again throughout the house in quite a haunting fashion. So I think the thing about this movie, I don't necessarily say, I wouldn't say it's a good movie. I wouldn't say it's a bad movie. Throughout the movie, it's quite dull at times. I do like the imagery of the wife walking down that hallway. I think sometimes she has a knife, or maybe it was like a scalpel or something. I like the scenes where he was seeing his wife kind of coming towards him, but those scenes are kind of once every 15-20 minutes, and all the things happening between those moments. While it's not boring, it's just a bit dull. I guess dull is the way to explain it for me. I like the music in the movie. There's a tune she plays on the piano. It's not all that memorable, but as you hear it, it's, you hear it in the background. Oh, okay, something's about to start happening. So I kind of enjoyed that aspect of it as well. Yeah, it's sounding like you didn't have all that much fun with this one. So what were your thoughts on this?
I actually thought the movie, taken by itself, it was competent. It was like okay, it was stuffy. The problem is, I've seen this story many times before 1979. There's a extraordinarily well-known French movie from 1955 titled Diabolic, which is not necessarily horror, but it has a pretty similar plot, and it's a fantastic movie. Then there's a 1958 movie titled The Screaming Skull, which has a very similar plot. Then there's a 1963 Italian movie starring Barbara Steele titled The Ghost, or in its original Italian Lo Spaccio, which again has a very, very similar plot. And all three of those movies I think are better done than this one. So it's not so much the movie itself is horrible, it's just that the story has been done quite a few times before, and because of that, it's really hard to take this one as that original a movie. I mean, like, the movie itself is okay. Like you said, there's some creepy things, it's occasionally atmospheric, but I don't know, it's pretty stuffy. It's like an hour and 40 minutes. You can watch it, it's just, I don't know how much fun you're going to have. There's a few interesting scenes. I like the death of, I think it was a doctor, but I forget the character exactly. But that was a pretty interesting, it's almost like a first-person point of view death sequence. That was interesting. But, I don't know, the story just wasn't unique, and, I don't know, it's not necessarily a terrible movie. It's just, I've seen this before, and I've seen it better. So, that's my main opinion.
Yeah, well, I did first watch this, it was on Tubi TV, but it was like a standard definition. It was kind of like watching a good VHS tape, I guess, or maybe like a pretty old DVD maybe. And I guess when I was watching that, as you know, I prefer the best quality that I can, because clearly I think most movies that get made, even the older ones, or they weren't meant to be seen or washed out full screen on a VHS, The director's intention is, usually a widescreen presentation, you can see everything clearly. So when I first watched it in that standard def type quality, I think I missed out on some of, what they have, they called it like the conservatory, the area where all the hanging was.
The sort of gardening. Yeah, gardening, yeah.
Now, I'm not sure what kind of quality you watch this movie in, but I watched a HD version of it recently, and the colors really popped in that area. Like, it was kind of like a neon type, a lot of pinky purples and blues, and it was quite nice to see in those particular scenes. It really stood out. It was something that I didn't see in that standard version.
So I actually watched the version that was on Tubi. So you know me, I can I can pretty much watch static on the screen and enjoy it. I'm not quality, like, it doesn't matter that much to me. So I kind of imagine seeing it in like sort of I guess more vivid colors would probably make some scenes stand out more. I actually do think that conservatory scenes are probably some of the better scenes. One, because I really like that area of the house. I thought it was pretty cool. And of course, well, obviously a lot of the action takes place, where they're hanging. So I thought that was pretty cool. One thing I actually did want to quickly mention is that when you brought this movie up to, possibly talk about, I never really heard of this one before. It's, I mean, based on what I've seen, it's not a particularly well-known movie, and maybe that's going to be changing over the next, 5 years, I'm not sure, but it's not a movie I heard much about, so I definitely think it was interesting seeing, especially what was going on over in the UK in the late 70s, so, I don't know, just a small thing, but I thought it was sort of interesting.
Yeah, so I had an okay time with this one. There's nothing really all that great or memorable about it. The occasional scenes where he's seeing his wife, or supposedly seeing his wife, walking down the hallways and things like that. Those moments were pretty decent, but they're kind of mixed in with a lot of other dull or slow-moving scenes where there's just not, even though there's things happening and the story's progressing, it's just not always all that exciting. I didn't mind the twist. Like you said, it's not all that original, but to be honest, originality is not a huge thing for me. I appreciate it when it does happen, but I mean, we watch slasher movies which copycat every other movie before it, until the end of time, so it's not such a huge problem for me. I'll give the movie a 6. Yeah, I didn't mind watching it, and I probably won't mind watching it again, maybe 5-10 years down the track, but it was just okay.
I think I agree with most of that. I think Dominique's a fine movie. It's made decently well. It's just that the content is occasionally boring. It's a bit stuffy. That may partially be because it's a British movie. So maybe that's a sort of Americanized point of view. But I don't think this movie has a lot going for it. I mean, I like The Tryst, but, like I said, I've seen The Tryst so many times before movies from before 1979, so, I mean, it's not like it came across as shocking. Like, as soon as I started seeing, these sort of ghostly apparitions, I thought, oh, hey, is that where this movie's going on? Hey, it's where that movie went, so, I don't know, there's not much unique, and there's nothing really in this movie that stood out that well. There's a few creepiest scenes, but I saw this movie like 2 days ago and I don't remember most of it, so yeah, it's not a particularly memorable movie. So, I mean, I'm okay with giving this like a 6 out of 10. I mean, it's not terrible. It's okay. It's just, I mean, there's not much, in my opinion, there's not much to it. And I don't know if there's much of a point to it, in my opinion.
Yeah. That one chauffeur guy, what was his name? Tony? Tony? Yeah. It's funny. I just, whenever it was on screen talking, I kept thinking Michael Caine.
I can see it.
Yeah. He had a similar look, and obviously the voice, and
you know what?
I don't know.
I'll say if this movie had Michael Caine in it, I would give it like at least a 7.
It needed that Michael Caine touch. Yeah, he tried to do his best Michael Caine and just came up short.
Next up, we have a true classic, and this movie actually has pretty decent ratings by most people on IMDb. It has right now a 7.6, and if you know anything about IMDb ratings for horror movies, a 7.6 is decently high. The plot is it's difficult. This is if you watch the movie without reading anything. What you can take from the plot is that this young guy gets to a hotel and strange things begin to happen. Then he winds up at a house where other strange things begin to happen, and then other strange things happen, and he seems to be buried, but he's not, because he's a ghost, but he's not, and other strange things happen, and there's also a vampire, I guess. I don't know. The movie is somewhat nonsensical in my opinion, and I've seen this movie before, so it's not even the first time. So there's a plot there, but it's not told in a particularly easy to understand way. And I know that some people really like that. It gives the movie a very dreamy feel, and plus the movie's in black and white, plus the movie is, I mean, it's not a silent movie, but in many ways it feels like a silent movie.
Yeah.
So that also gives it more of an sort of a dreamy feel, and some people really like that, but it's not my type of thing. I didn't particularly enjoy it the first time I saw this movie, and I did particularly enjoy it this time. But before I say much more, I'm sure, Chucky, you had some pretty enjoyable feelings for this one.
Yeah. This is going to be like the shortest review ever. I mean, I was being really... I kind of went along with this movie because, you know, you've been doing a lot of action things. I know action's not your thing, so I thought I'd be nice and try and do something that wasn't my thing. And
I apologize.
All it's really done is just kind of reaffirm that.
Okay,
movies...
if I may say,
okay, sure.
If I may say one thing, most horror movies from the 30s are not like this. So.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, I saw the rating on IMDb. I was like, wow, that's a really high rating. So if there's any movie out there from, you know, the 20s, 30s, 40s, all that while back, certainly, you know, if there's something that I was going to enjoy, possibly this could be it. Admittedly, I didn't even get through the whole movie.
Yeah.
So, and to be honest, that may not just be because of the movie itself. It's more just I just don't enjoy all these really old movies. I could probably get into some of the stuff from the 50s and 60s, but I think anything before that I'm really gonna struggle with. And yeah, so like I said, I didn't even finish it. I probably got a little over halfway through, I think.
I will say this movie, and now unlike Chucky, I've seen a lot of 1920s and 30s horror movies, and I've seen quite a few, and this one has always. I mean, this was actually recommended to me by a friend of mine who knew I liked, you know, all the classics and thought, hey, you know, Jaggy, you should check out Vampyr. And I checked it out, and I was impressed by the dreamy feel to the movie. There's not that many movies I've seen that feel this sort of disjointed, and you know, there's, you know, some movies like Eraserhead from 1977, which sort of have the same type of feel, but I mean, I hate that one too. But this one was just, I just had a very difficult time trying to follow along with whatever plot was going on. And there was some interesting imagery. There's some, you know, it's occasionally like almost creepy things if they were actually happening, and I liked the use of shadows in some of the scenes. I mean, there's some really creative filming techniques here, and if you actually read into, like, you know, the way they made the movie, there's a lot of interesting things that they did, which is partially, I suspect, why the movie has decently high reviews. And it's also one of the last really big German horror movies until, like, I don't know, the 1970s probably. So, I mean, even historically speaking, it's, you know, somewhat important, but it's because of the disjointed plot. Even if you watch the whole thing, nothing's really made clear, and I don't know, it's a movie that is autistic. If you're in, like, film classes, you know, you might watch this and talk about it and dissect it, but watching this for enjoyment, I just don't see it, and I don't particularly like the movie that much whatsoever.
Yeah, well, that sums up my thoughts, on top of just not really having any kind of love at all for movies of that era.
Yeah, so the fact that both you and I dislike this, it's interesting, since, you know, we have somewhat different experiences with all the horror movies. So it's unfortunate because I wish I could, you know, be a big pro-vampire guy, and Chucky could be like an anti-vampire guy, and we could fight this out. But no, I just don't care for this movie at all. And if you're looking for some classic horror to watch, even if you're looking for foreign horror, I can recommend plenty of silent German horror movies that are much better than this one. And I don't know, if you're into the whole dreamy atmosphere type thing, that's great and that's fantastic, and I'd recommend this one. But if you're into something with an actual plot, I would not recommend this. So despite my somewhat harsh take on this, there are some things I enjoy, even though I don't necessarily find the movie itself enjoyable. I appreciate the what they went for. I don't think it particularly worked. Well, I guess to many people it did. I mean, like I said, it's a pretty high rating, and it's not even a small amount of people who rated it. It's like 14,000. So apparently quite a few people enjoyed what this is going for. And I did enjoy it, but I did appreciate it. And even though I disliked how they went with the story, I thought some of the plot elements, which I could understand, were okay. So I'm going to just throw this movie a 5 out of 10, which is definitely a below average movie. And this, I don't even know if I'd necessarily go out of my way to watch this one again. But I appreciate some things about it. But a 5 out of 10 is that's as best as I can do for this one.
Yeah. I mean, I think I've made it pretty clear that I just don't really care for movies from around this time. I mean, I respect it, but I don't necessarily have an appreciation for really any of it. So I just don't enjoy it, and I certainly don't see myself ever wanting to watch it again. So I almost feel like I should abstain from rating it, but if I must rate it, I give it a 2. And the only reason why I don't give it a 1 is because I still think, like I said, I respect it for its time. That is probably how movies were back then, how limited you were with what you could do. I guess there's something there, but it's certainly not as bad as watching someone just grab a camera, show their crotch, and say, "Here's a horror movie." So, yeah, but
at least it has a plot. Now, out of interest, out of the movies that you've watched for not just this episode, but for this whole show that we've done, is this the first one that you've not finished?
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I didn't like turn it off or anything. I actually fell asleep.
Oh, I don't blame you.
And I mean, partially that's because my sleep pattern is just all over the place. So I was watching it shortly after work, and busy day, tired. Unless the movie was going to hold my attention, I was probably going to drop off no matter what it was, whether it was this or Dominique or
Die Hard.
Yeah, well, I mean, it'd have to be something really compelling probably to have kept me awake. So I didn't turn the movie off. I just happened to fall asleep and decided, I know I'm not going to enjoy the rest, so why bother?
I do appreciate the honesty. But he's not wrong, guys.
Anyways, moving on to the final movie for today. We've got Searching, which actually had a bit of a limited theatre run, at least over here, and I'm sure it did in the US. It's about a man who he's lost his wife, I think, to cancer. Was it cancer? I can't recall now.
I think it was some type of cancer.
Some type of, cancer type ailment. So, and now he appears to have had his daughter go missing. So he must essentially interrogate his way through the web and social media, and he has to go through all that just to find out what's happened to her. Is she still alive? What's happened to her? It's pretty thrilling stuff, I guess. I was pretty much on the edge of my seat during most of the movie. It has quite a lot of twists and turns, and you start thinking, okay, it's this guy, okay, no, it's not him, it's this person, or this is what happened, and they really take you on a bit of a ride, I guess, until you get to the actual conclusion as to what happened to, or, the situation. It's quite a unique movie, I guess, in its presentation. We see a lot of the point of view just from someone's desktop computer. I guess you could say it's someone took the idea of those unfriended movies and actually put some thought into it and decided to actually write a decent movie, I guess.
I'm going to assume you did not like Unfriended.
Well, I saw the first one and, it's pretty mediocre type stuff, and I heard the sequel to that was a bit better, but I never bothered with it just yet. But no, I thought this was, quite a unique movie, and there's a lot more meat to it than, like those Unfriended movies or any of these other online-driven type movies.
So I've never seen Unfriended, though. I mean, there's quite a few movies like this. There's a movie from, I think, 2011 titled Megan is Missing, which was quite in the same vein. And this type of movie has it makes sense. It's sort of like an extension of found footage almost. Instead of just, found footage, it's using the computer screen as the main. It makes sense in a technologically advanced age. I thought the movie was actually really interesting. I thought some of the parts were somewhat unrealistic. I mean, do people really use their computers as much as this guy did? I mean, I guess they do.
I think they do. Yeah.
I may be out of the out of touch, but that's okay. So some of it was a bit difficult for me to, I'm not in front of my computer, with all these, Skype up and all this stuff and FaceTime and all this stuff. It just felt like a bit much, and different accounts on your computer. Who actually uses different accounts on the same computer? I've actually never seen that in my, I've never seen people do that before. So that was interesting. I actually really enjoy this. It was pretty intense. The way they did the movie made it pretty interesting. And if they had done this in a more conventional way, I suspect the movie would be quite a bit more generic. That said, there's some things that happen toward the end of the movie that feel like, maybe they went a bit more generic toward the end of the movie, but I still thought it was mostly okay. And like I said, I've never seen this type of movie before, so I thought it was definitely interesting. I just, I don't know. I'd like to see how a movie like this would work with the horror genre. I do know there was a movie, I think it was from 2013, titled The Dan, that would be DEN, which was, I think it was made in pretty much the same type of way, and I remember that one being pretty good, but having not seen, Unfriended, I'm not sure if there's that many other examples of this out there. Although I suspect in the coming years, we're going to see more and more of this movie, especially since it seems Sochin did a decent job. And some of that may be because of the main actor, John Cho, who is, I know him from Harold and Kumar, Go to White Castle, which was so funny seeing him in this.
And American Pie.
Yes, yeah.
So he's always after the MILF.
MILF.
Yeah.
So funny seeing him in a quite a bit more serious role. And I thought it was really interesting. And there's not many action movies that make me think, oh hey, that's cool. But the movie's pretty cool.
Yeah. And I'm kind of out of touch as well with the most recent cutting-edge technology that people use. You may even be further from that than I am.
I have a torn tablet.
Yeah, but I'd say it's pretty spot on with how people use technology these days. I think there's a lot of people out there who are just always constantly on their phones and computers and using FaceTime, Skype, and it is just like a constant every hour of every day type thing, unless you're actually out and about outside the house. And even if you were outside the house, you'd be on your mobile phone probably. So, I personally don't use my mobile phone all that much, and I prefer using desktop computers. And yeah, so you and I are probably a little further from what the current generation do with their technology. You talked about how it's sort of like a found footage movie. That's actually something I was going to ask if you considered it a found footage, because a lot of it does take place, from a camera type point of view.
Technically, I'm going to get really anal on this definition. Technically, found footage to me implies that it takes place at a later date, like they find the footage later, and this was also present time footage. So I don't know. I think the presentation is very close. I think this type of movie has a specific type of subgenre name, but off the top of my head, I forget what it is. In my opinion, I sort of consider it not necessarily found footage, but maybe like the brother found footage, or maybe a son, stepchild. I don't know. It's definitely very related. Like in my opinion, if you don't like found footage movies just on principle, I sort of feel like you might not necessarily be able to enjoy this type of movie as much as other people do.
I mean, it was a pretty suspenseful. It was kind of suspenseful and thrilling. Like I said, it's got a lot of twists and turns. I think the main thing with this one is that it just doesn't have any, those memorable type scenes that you'd go back and specifically watch that one scene. It doesn't really have anything like that.
I also have watched that guy punch the movie theater dick out again. That was pretty funny.
Yeah.
I like the YouTube comments for that, by the way. Those are, I sort of like how realistic, with the YouTube comments, just this very serious story about these people. Oh, the father probably killed, or like, it is just so funny. It's totally realistic, so I enjoyed that.
Yeah. So it's a pretty good ride, but I didn't think it had any of those scenes that after the movie's done, you'd go back and say, oh, I have to see that scene again.
I just want to say I wish I had an uncle as cool as this young girl did. So.
Well, you mean after we find out what really happened,
yes,
rather than before,
yes.
where we're thinking, okay, maybe he's done something sexual.
Yeah, I as soon as that subplot came up, I thought, hey, this is really interesting. But I'm thinking there's no way they could actually have it be some type of incest thing, and they obviously, we saw where they went with that. But I'm thinking that's way too easy in a way.
Yeah.
So I'm happy they made it what it was. So that's what I was talking about.
And I actually read, I think just yesterday, I read that they're making a sequel to this.
Oh really?
Yeah, I'm not. I don't know yet if they plan on using any of the same characters or if it's just, going to be another similar type movie with different.
She goes missing again.
Yeah. That'd be unfortunate. Yeah, so it looks like they're going to make another one. I just don't know anything more than that about it. But a lot of people seem to actually really enjoy this movie, at least, as a one-time viewing. Once again, like I said, without having any memorable scenes, and I think the strong part of this movie is how it keeps you on the edge of your seat, so you're kind of really interested in knowing what's happened, but now that you've watched the movie, you've found everything out, the movie loses that value. You can't really watch it again and have the same on the edge of your seat experience with it.
I will say, this is, maybe I'm really easy to please, but there was one scene that I really liked because it was, so tense. And it's toward the end, and I don't want to spoil anything in case you haven't seen this movie. But it's just, the characters are going someplace, and then one of the characters said it rained like 2 days ago, and then that as soon as the character said, hey, it rained 2 days ago, I'm like, oh god, that might mean this, and so it led to a little more maybe slightly more optimistic ending than you might expect. But I don't know, I thought it was just in that 1 second, hey, it rained 2 days ago, I was like, oh hey, this is going to be pretty cool.
Yeah. So with searching, I had a really good time with it. I just don't think it has a whole lot of replay value, mainly because it doesn't have those standout... I mean, it's got standout moments during the movie, but nothing that I would say, I gotta go back and see that scene again. So while it did keep me on the edge of my seat throughout, I just don't think there's a whole lot calling me back to watch it again. I'll give it a 7 out of 10. I was thinking of giving it an 8, but yeah, I just, that replay value is kind of lost once everything's unfolded and everything that's happened, and I can't envision myself watching it again, enjoying it as much as I did the first time.
I agree for the most part. I'm actually going to give this an 8 out of 10, and the one thing about the rewatchability I wanted to bring up is that if you're doing, watching it yourself, it's not going to be the same type of experience. But this is the type of movie where I feel like I could, find a friend or family member saying, hey, you should watch this, maybe just 2 or 3 days later after the first scene and say, hey, you should sit down and watch this. And I feel like you can have fun that way. And I think there's enough suspense. That some of the scenes are going to still mostly work out. And also, I'm sure if you watch this, I know I watched a few scenes again because there were some scenes early in the movie which sort of referenced the end of the movie. Just very small things, when he's looking through names and stuff. But I thought, hey, that's pretty well hidden. I sort of like how they did that. So there's some small things that, in my opinion, sort of make rewatching it maybe worthwhile. So I really enjoyed this one. I've not seen, like I said, I've not seen really many movies that do this. So I thought it was a very interesting presentation. I thought it was pretty thrilling, and 8 out of 10 seems like a pretty good rating for it.
MILF.
Unfortunately, I don't think he saw that in this movie.
No.
To my knowledge.
Now I'm sad.
Can you imagine him talking to his teenage child there about MILFs, though?
I almost can.
Okay. Okay. There were also a few other things that we wanted to discuss prior to ending the show. Before Chucky discusses a movie he saw, I just wanted to bring up one small thing, if that's okay with Chucky. Now, this show is being recorded, at least in my time zone, on the 16th. I think about 2 hours ago. Apparently, Peter Fonda passed away. Now, Peter Fonda is he's not an actor I'm particularly, while I haven't seen that many Peter Fonda movies. But for this show, I just wanted to mention that he was in one horror movie from the 1970s, which I think is very overlooked, titled Race with the Devil. And that's a movie, it's sort of a Satanist type movie that was very well made, very suspenseful, and Peter Fonda starred in that movie, did a fantastic job. And if you're interested in 70s horror, I would definitely recommend Race with the Devil, because it's unfortunately pretty overlooked, and it's, I think, a movie very well worth watching.
Yeah, I'm not particularly. I know the name. I just can't think of really. I think it's. I know it's in Spasms. Yeah, I can't really recall too much of what he was.
Yeah,
in.
yeah. Most of the bigger movies he was in, like Easy Rider, from the late 60s. It's just sort of like a drama, maybe adventure type movie. He's in his own way, he's a pretty popular actor. I've not seen many of his movies, but I just thought, especially since it's so recent, I thought it was maybe worth mentioning, especially since you can at least point out a few movies, in the horror genre that, at least he made pretty decent. And Chucky, you saw, to my knowledge, a movie recently which I have not seen. What was that movie?
Midsommar.
Oh boy.
I don't want to get into a big review or anything, because I'm sure at some point we'll probably discuss it. It was okay. It's certain. I went in knowing partially some of what to expect, just based on what I had seen in Hereditary, and I knew some of that would be amped up. So I kind of knew that, not exactly what would happen in the end, but I kind of knew the type of vibe the ending would have. So it wasn't all that surprising what happened there.
Now, out of interest, did you like Hereditary more or less than this one?
I like Hereditary more. It's a little more conventional, I guess. And that's not necessarily the only reason why, but that probably helped for me. There's some good things to mention about Midsommar, like being that it's a horror movie that pretty much takes place completely in daylight. Like, it's very rare for a horror movie to do that, and it does it somewhat well, I guess. A movie that has sunny skies and flowers and everything. Not normally the type of things you'd associate with a typical horror movie.
I'm guessing, you've seen a few other horror movies that came out this year. I think you saw Crawl, the new, I think it was the new Annabelle movie,
Mhm.
and obviously we both saw Child's Play. Is this probably, out of what you've seen this year, one of the lower ranking ones?
I mean, I'd say it's lower than all of those movies that you just listed. Maybe, well, Annabelle probably on the same level. I think the worst movies that I've seen, at least in the past 12 months at the cinema, were The Nun. I can't remember exactly when that came out. I think that might have been last year, but that would have been in the last 12 months. And I thought the Suspiria remake was just really slow and pretentious, and I mean, my wife watched that again recently and said it was a lot better on the second time around. But she's a fan of the original, whereas the original, it's okay to me. It's not something that I particularly love, and that remake of it just didn't do anything for me.
Well, I just parked that once we have a Dario Argento day, your opinion may change.